The Devourer threat ended not with massive battles or desperate last stands, but with something far more elegant and terrifying. Dr. Helen Parker stood in the reality engineering chamber aboard the human research station Unity and watched as her team prepared to demonstrate the true extent of human evolution. Dimensional isolation field is ready, reported her assistant Jake Norton as quantum generators hummed with power that existed partially outside normal space-time. All Devourer units have been tagged with phase markers, Admiral Chris Baker observed from the command center as thousands of human vessels positioned themselves throughout the galaxy. Each ship carried technology that could manipulate the basics or structure of reality itself, and their crews had spent decades learning to think in ways that transcended normal limitations. Execute dimensional displacement, Baker ordered, and space itself responded to human will. The effect was immediate and absolute. Every Devourer machine in the galaxy simply stopped existing in any dimension that mattered to galactic civilization. They hadn't been destroyed or driven away, but locked into a pocket universe where they could consume each other for eternity. Without threatening anyone else, Captain Tony Clark watched from his observation post as entire Devourer fleets vanished like smoke in a strong wind. The mechanical swarms that had seemed unstoppable moments before now existed only in a reality designed specifically to contain them. "How did you do that?" Clark asked through the communication link, and his voice carried amazement mixed with fear. "We convinced reality that the Devourers belonged somewhere else," Dr. Parker explained casually. "From our perspective, it was simply a matter of editing the basic code that defines what can exist where." The Galactic Council met in emergency session aboard the newly constructed human diplomatic station Unity. The station itself was a demonstration of power that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and could house the entire galactic population if needed. High Commander Velox 7 floated in his bubble of blue light, but his silver form now showed cracks and stress marks that spoke of a mind struggling to accept impossible truths. The being who had once dismissed humans as primitive pets now faced the reality that they had become something beyond his understanding. Ambassador Carol Wright stepped forward to address the assembled delegates, and her presence seemed to fill the massive chamber despite her human scale. She had inherited Jake Morrison's position, but the species she represented bore little resemblance to the one that had been humiliated 75 years earlier. "The immediate threat has been neutralized," Wright announced, and her words carried harmonics that suggested experiences beyond normal comprehension. "But this crisis has revealed fundamental problems with how galactic civilization operates." President Lisa King appeared on the main display, broadcasting from an Earth that now existed in its own stable pocket dimension. The planet behind her looked like a blue jewel set in twisted space-time that defied conventional understanding. "Humanity offers a new model for galactic cooperation," King explained. "Partnership based on mutual benefit rather than dominance hierarchies built on technological advantage." The alien delegates listened in silence as humans outlined their vision for a transformed galaxy. Species would contribute their unique strengths to common goals rather than competing for resources and territory. Technology would be shared freely, and power would be distributed based on wisdom rather than military capability. Dr. Sarah Kim spoke from her position in the scientific section. "The humans are offering to teach us dimensional manipulation," she reported with excitement in her voice. "They're proposing to share knowledge that could elevate every species to their level." "At what cost?" demanded a delegate from the Crystalline Empire, whose voice sounded like breaking glass. The cost is accepting that the old ways of thinking are obsolete, Wright replied. Concepts like territorial control and resource scarcity become meaningless when you can create whatever you need from quantum foam. Admiral Vera Blackwood activated her communication system from the neutral zone. "I've seen their technology in action," she announced. "What they're offering isn't conquest disguised as cooperation. It's genuine partnership with beings who have transcended the need for domination." Commander Steve Johnson appeared on a secondary screen leading human reconstruction teams to worlds that had been damaged by the Devourer invasion. His crews didn't simply repair the destruction, but improved each world beyond its original condition. "We're not interested in ruling over other species," Johnson explained as his teams used reality editing technology to transform barren planets into garden worlds. "We've learned that true power comes from helping others reach their full potential." The transformation of galactic civilization began slowly as small groups of volunteers from different species traveled to human training facilities hidden in folded space. They learned to manipulate dimensional energy on a basic level and returned to their homeworlds with knowledge that seemed like magic. Engineer Lucy Davis supervised the construction of hybrid technology that combined human dimensional science with traditional galactic engineering. The results were devices that could reshape matter at the quantum level and tap directly into the energy that existed between realities. "The learning curve is steep," Davis admitted during one of her progress reports. "But every species we've worked with has shown remarkable adaptability once they accept that their old assumptions about physics were incomplete." Former High Commander Velox 7 surprised everyone by requesting to join the human training program. His mechanical form made the dimensional exercises difficult, but his centuries of experience provided insights that even human scientists found valuable. "I was wrong about your species," Velox 7 told Admiral Baker during one of their study sessions. "You weren't primitive. You were simply focused on different priorities than technological display." Baker smiled, and the expression carried kindness mixed with understanding. "We were exactly as primitive as you believed," he replied. "But we had something that your empire lacked. We had the ability to grow and change when faced with challenges." The first Galactic Unity Festival took place 5 years after the Devourer crisis in a space station that existed partially in normal reality and partially in dimensions that had been created specifically for the celebration. Beings from hundreds of species mingled freely while human children taught alien youngsters how to fold space with their thoughts. Captain Clark walked through gardens where plants from dozens of worlds grew in impossible configurations that defied every principle of biology. Time moved at different speeds in different sections, creating microclimates that allowed incompatible species to coexist. "It's beautiful," said Dr. Kim as she watched a human artist paint with light that existed in colors beyond the normal spectrum. "I never imagined that cooperation could create something like this." President King addressed the festival gathering from a platform that existed in all 17 dimensions simultaneously. Her words reached every being present regardless of their sensory capabilities or communication methods. "This is what becomes possible when species work together instead of competing against each other," King announced. "We've only begun to explore what we can accomplish when we combine human dimensional science with the unique gifts of every galactic species." The celebration continued for days as beings who had once been enemies learned to create art and technology together. Human children played with alien youngsters in games that involved manipulating pocket dimensions and racing through folded space. Admiral Baker stood on an observation deck that looked out over the festival and felt satisfaction at seeing the galaxy they had helped create. Humanity had achieved something far greater than military conquest or technological dominance. They had learned to use infinite power with infinite restraint. Dr. Helen Parker joined him at the viewing window, and together they watched as a group of mixed species worked together to create a new form of music that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Do you think it will last?" Parker asked. "Nothing lasts forever," Baker replied. "But what we've built here has a chance to evolve into something even better. That's all any civilization can hope for." The galaxy that spread out before them no longer resembled the empire-based hierarchy that had existed before the Devourer crisis. Instead of competing species struggling for dominance, it had become a cooperative civilization where every being could contribute their unique strengths to common goals. Earth shone like a blue jewel in its pocket of twisted space-time, while human children who existed partially outside normal reality taught their alien friends to paint with starlight and build castles from crystallized time. The species that had once been dismissed as primitive pets had become teachers and protectors for a galaxy that had learned to worship something far more profound than technology. They had learned to worship wisdom balanced with power and the infinite potential that became possible when beings worked together instead of against each other. The story ended not with conquest or destruction, but with transformation and the promise of even greater changes to come as the galaxy continued to evolve under the guidance of a species that had learned the most important lesson of all, TR. Admiral Chris Baker waited patiently as the Galactic Council debated humanity's offer in emergency session aboard the Centauri diplomatic station. Through the quantum communication link, he could sense the fear and confusion radiating from delegates, who had suddenly discovered that their understanding of reality was completely wrong. High Commander Velox 7 finally activated his transmission after 3 hours of heated argument. His silver face showed stress fractures that hadn't been there before the human demonstration, and his mechanical voice carried undertones of defeat. "The Council agrees to meet with human representatives," Velox 7 announced reluctantly. "But we demand proof that your species truly has the power to eliminate the Devourer threat." Baker nodded and gestured to someone outside the transmission range. "Commander Susan Murphy will escort a small delegation to our flagship," he said. "We believe direct observation will answer your questions more effectively than words." The human vessel that arrived at the Council station defied every principle of known engineering. The ship looked organic despite being clearly artificial, with flowing curves that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. It existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, which made accurate measurement impossible. Captain Tony Clark volunteered to join the inspection team along with Dr. Sarah Kim and Admiral Vera Blackwood. As their shuttle approached the human ship, they could see space itself bending around the massive structure, like reality was being gently folded. Commander Murphy met them at the airlock, and the first thing Clark noticed was how she moved with fluid grace that suggested her body had been optimized far beyond normal human capabilities. Her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences in realms beyond ordinary understanding. "Welcome to the new horizon," Murphy said, and her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate inside their bones. "Admiral Baker is waiting for you in the observation deck." The corridors inside the ship violated basic geometry with passages that were clearly longer than the exterior dimensions should have allowed. Rooms opened onto other rooms that existed in impossible configurations, and gravity seemed to flow in whatever direction was most convenient. Dr. Kim activated her scanning equipment, but the readings made no sense. The internal structure is bigger than the external structure, she reported with confusion in her voice. That's not physically possible. We've learned to fold space itself into useful configurations, Murphy explained casually. Why build bigger ships when you can make the inside bigger than the outside? They passed through a garden where plants grew from pure energy instead of soil, and time moved at different speeds in different sections. Some flowers bloomed and died in seconds, while others remained frozen between one moment and the next. Admiral Blackwood stopped walking when she saw a group of human children playing with toys that defied the laws of physics. The toys changed color and shape in response to the children's thoughts and occasionally vanished into other dimensions before reappearing somewhere else. How long have you been developing this technology? Blackwood asked. 75 years of focused research, Murphy replied. When you're hidden from the galaxy, you can pursue pure science without worrying about military applications or political interference. The observation deck occupied the center of the ship and existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Admiral Baker stood before a viewing screen that showed the galaxy from perspectives that normal sensors couldn't detect. Welcome to our home, Baker said, and gestured toward the impossible view. From here we can observe the quantum structure underlying all reality. Captain Clark stared at the display, which showed the galaxy as a web of interconnected energy patterns. The Devourer invasion appeared as dark spots where the normal quantum foam had been disrupted and consumed. The Devourers are extra-dimensional parasites, Baker explained. They consume the basic structure of space-time itself, which is why conventional weapons are useless against them. Dr. Kim studied the readings with growing understanding. You exist even further outside normal reality than they do, she said. That's why you can affect them when we can't, correct? Baker confirmed. But the real question is whether we should solve this problem for the galaxy or teach the galaxy to solve it for themselves. The alien delegates exchanged glances as they began to understand the deeper implications of Baker's words. Humanity wasn't just offering to defeat the Devourers, but to fundamentally change how galactic civilization operated. Dr. Paul Andrews appeared beside Baker like a ghost stepping out of the walls. The human scientist looked ancient despite his young appearance, and his eyes held the weight of knowledge that spanned multiple universes. The current galactic structure is based on dominance hierarchies, Andrews said. Stronger species control weaker ones through technological superiority. This creates inevitable conflicts and prevents true cooperation. What are you proposing instead? Admiral Blackwood asked. Partnership based on mutual benefit rather than conquest, Baker replied. Species working together to explore and develop rather than competing for resources and territory. Velox 7's image appeared on a communication screen, and his mechanical voice carried overtones of suspicion. Easy words from a species that now holds all the power, he said. How do we know humans won't simply become the new dominant empire? Andrews activated a holographic display that showed detailed plans for galactic restructuring. The images revealed a civilization where different species contributed their unique strengths to common goals rather than fighting for individual advantage. Because we've learned what happens when power corrupts, Andrews explained. During our isolation, we studied the rise and fall of countless civilizations. We understand that true strength comes from cooperation, not domination. The demonstration that followed changed everything the aliens thought they knew about power and restraint. Baker gestured toward the viewing screen, and reality shifted to show the Devourer invasion from a perspective that existed outside normal time. "Watch carefully," Baker said, as human forces engaged the mechanical swarms across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The battle lasted for subjective hours but occupied only seconds in normal space. Time. Captain Clark watched in amazement as human soldiers fought wearing armor that existed partially in folded space. Their weapons didn't destroy Devourer units, but simply convinced them to stop existing in any dimension that mattered to galactic civilization. "We could eliminate every Devourer in the galaxy within one standard day," Baker announced. "But that would teach you nothing about defending yourselves against future threats." Colonel Rachel Stone appeared on the screen, leading human ground forces in the liberation of occupied worlds. Her soldiers moved through enemy fire that couldn't touch them because they existed one step sideways from normal reality. "Instead, we propose a joint training program," Baker continued. "We'll teach selected individuals from each species how to manipulate dimensional energy on a basic level." Dr. Kim felt her scientific mind struggling to process concepts that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics. "You're talking about sharing technology that could fundamentally alter the nature of galactic civilization." "That's exactly what we're talking about," Andrews confirmed. "The age of empires built on technological advantage is ending. The future belongs to species that can work together across multiple dimensions of reality." The viewing screen showed human teams working alongside alien scientists to develop new forms of technology that combined human dimensional manipulation with traditional galactic engineering. The results were devices that seemed like magic. Compared to anything that had existed before, Admiral Blackwood studied the technical specifications with growing excitement. "The power output from these hybrid systems is beyond anything we've ever imagined," she said. "Power is just energy properly applied," Baker replied. "What matters is how that power is used, and who makes the decisions about its application." Commander Murphy led them to another section of the ship where human diplomats were meeting with representatives from dozens of species. The discussions focused on creating new forms of government that could handle citizens who existed across multiple dimensions. The old concepts of territory and resource control become meaningless when you can create whatever you need from quantum foam, Murphy explained. "We're designing social structures for a post-scarcity civilization." Captain Clark realized he was witnessing the birth of something entirely new in galactic history. Not just advanced technology, but a completely different way of thinking about power relationships and social organization. "The choice is yours," Baker said as the tour concluded. "We can solve the Devourer problem for you and leave you to continue as before. Or you can join us in building something that has never existed before in this galaxy." The alien delegates returned to their shuttle with minds full of impossible images and concepts that challenged their basic assumptions about reality. The galaxy they had known was ending, whether they chose to participate in its transformation or not. Velox 7 waited for their report with growing impatience, but when he heard their descriptions of human capabilities, his mechanical composure finally cracked. The species he had dismissed as primitive pets had become something beyond his ability to categorize or control. "What do they want from us?" he asked again. 75 years had passed since humanity vanished from normal space, and the galaxy had changed in ways that nobody expected. The great Zephyrian Empire now controlled most of the known worlds, and their technology seemed unstoppable until the day the stars began to die. Captain. Tony Clark stood on the bridge of his Altarian defense vessel and watched through the viewing screen as another solar system went dark. The Devourers had come from outside the galaxy, like a plague of metal locusts that consumed everything in their path. They turned planets into raw materials and absorbed the energy of stars to fuel their endless reproduction. That's the 15th system this month, reported his communications officer with fear clear in her voice. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within a year. Admiral Vera Blackwood's image appeared on the main display as she broadcast from the Emergency Council meeting on Centauri Prime. Her face looked older than her years, and her eyes held the exhaustion of someone who had watched civilization begin to crumble. The Zephyrian quantum weapons have proven completely ineffective, Blackwood announced to the gathered fleet commanders. The Devourer machines adapt to any attack within minutes and become immune to further damage. Clark activated his own communication channel. What about the other species, he asked. Are the Crystalline Empire or the Hive worlds having any better luck? The Crystallines lost 3 worlds yesterday, Blackwood replied. The Hive Queens are evacuating their outer colonies as we speak. Every weapon we've tried just makes the Devourers stronger. The strategic display showed the invasion routes like red veins spreading through the galaxy. The mechanical swarms moved with purpose and intelligence that suggested they weren't just mindless destroyers but something far more dangerous. High Commander Velox 7 appeared on a secondary screen, and his silver face showed cracks that hadn't been there before the crisis began. We must consider evacuation beyond the galactic rim, he said, and his mechanical voice carried tones of defeat. Perhaps we can establish new colonies in distant galaxies. Running away won't solve anything, Clark argued. These things followed us here from somewhere else, which means they can follow us anywhere we go. The meeting continued for hours as military leaders shared increasingly desperate plans. Some suggested using star destroyers to create barriers of radiation and debris. Others proposed biological weapons that might affect the mechanical invaders. All of the ideas sounded like the last gasps of a dying civilization. Dr. Sarah Kim spoke from her research station on the edge of the battle zone. We've analyzed Devourer technology, and it's unlike anything in our databases, she reported. The materials are held together by forces that shouldn't be possible according to known physics. Are you saying they're using some kind of unknown science? Blackwood asked. I'm saying they might be using technology that exists partially outside normal reality, Kim replied. The energy signatures suggest multidimensional engineering far beyond anything we've ever encountered. Clark felt a strange sensation when he heard those words. Multidimensional engineering sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember where he'd heard the term before. He activated his personal database and began searching through old historical files. The answer came from an archive so old that most people had forgotten it existed. Buried in the classified records from 75 years ago was a report about a species that had claimed to possess advanced dimensional technology. The species that had vanished without explanation just before developing what they called pocket dimension manipulation. Admiral, Clark said suddenly, and his voice cut through the ongoing strategy discussion. I think I know someone who might be able to help us. The command chamber fell silent as every officer turned to look at him. Blackwood raised an eyebrow and gestured for him to continue. The humans, Clark announced, and several alien officers made sounds of confusion. The species that disappeared 75 years ago, Their last research reports mentioned multidimensional technology. Velox 7 floated closer to his communication screen. The humans were primitive, he stated with mechanical certainty. They could barely achieve faster than light travel. But they vanished completely, Clark insisted. An entire star system doesn't just disappear unless someone has technology we don't understand. Dr. Kim's eyes widened as she accessed her own historical databases. The dimensional energy readings from the human disappearance are similar to what we're seeing from the Devourer technology, she said with growing excitement. Blackwood leaned forward in her command chair. Are you suggesting the humans developed advanced dimensional science and then used it to hide from us? It would explain how they vanished so completely, Clark replied. And if they've had 75 years to develop that technology further, they might be our only hope. The idea seemed impossible, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The Galactic Council authorized long-range communication broadcasts, directed toward the space where Earth had once existed. The messages were simple pleas for help from a galaxy facing extinction. The response came not from empty space, but from everywhere at once. Massive structures began materializing throughout the galaxy, like cities appearing out of thin air. They were clearly artificial, but their design was unlike anything in the known databases. The largest structure appeared near the council meeting point and identified itself through quantum communication channels that bypassed all known defensive screens. The message was in perfect galactic standard, but the voice that delivered it carried undertones that suggested vast changes. "This is Admiral Chris Baker of the human vessel New Horizon," the voice announced, and images began appearing on every screen in the galaxy. "We received your distress calls and have come to offer assistance." The figure that appeared was recognizably human, but subtly different from the species that had left the galaxy decades earlier. Admiral Baker stood taller than the humans in historical records, and his features had an almost ethereal quality that spoke of genetic optimization. His eyes held depths that suggested experiences beyond normal comprehension. Velox 7 stared at the image with what might have been shock. "This is impossible," he said. "Humans were barely capable of interplanetary travel." "We've learned much during our time away," Baker replied, and his voice carried amusement mixed with something that might have been pity. "We understand you're facing difficulties with extra galactic invaders." The display screens throughout the galaxy showed images of human vessels engaging Devourer scout fleets. The human ships moved like living things through space that bent around them in impossible ways. Their weapons didn't destroy the mechanical invaders, but simply caused them to stop existing as if they had been erased from reality itself. "How are you doing that?" demanded Dr. Kim, as she watched a Devourer battleship larger than a moon simply vanish when touched by a beam of twisted light. "We've learned to edit the basic code of reality," Baker explained casually. "The Devourers exist partially outside normal space-time, but we exist even further outside. From our perspective, they're just another engineering problem." Captain Clark watched in amazement as human forces swept through the galaxy, undoing months of Devourer progress in a matter of hours. Consumed worlds reappeared from nothing, and dead stars reignited as if they had never been extinguished. "We're willing to help you defend your civilization," Baker continued. "But first, we need to discuss the terms of galactic membership and mutual respect." The words hung in space like a challenge that nobody quite understood. The species that had once been dismissed as primitive pets was now offering to save the galaxy, but only if their conditions were met. Velox 7 tried to maintain his authority in the face of impossibility. The Zephyrian Empire does not negotiate with lesser species, he declared. Baker's image smiled, and the expression somehow managed to be both kind and terrifying. Perhaps you should reconsider that position, he suggested. After all, we're no longer the same species you remember. The demonstration that followed lasted exactly 37 seconds. Human technology reached across space and temporarily moved the Zephyrian homeworld into a pocket dimension where time moved differently. For the aliens on the surface, 37 seconds became 37 years of isolation before their planet returned to normal space. "We mean no harm," Baker assured the terrified alien leaders, "but we think it's important that everyone understands the current situation clearly." Admiral Blackwood found her voice first among the stunned galactic representatives. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "Recognition as equal partners in Galactic." "Civilization," Baker replied. "An end to the empire-based hierarchy that has dominated this galaxy for too long. A chance to build something better together." Clark looked around the command chamber at faces that showed fear, wonder, and dawning comprehension. The galaxy had spent 75 years assuming that humanity was gone forever. Instead, they had been growing and learning in ways that defied imagination. "The Devourers represent a threat to all reality," Baker continued. "We can eliminate them completely, but only if this galaxy agrees to fundamental changes in how species relate to each other." The choice was clear and terrible in its simplicity. Accept humanity as the new power in the galaxy, or face extinction from enemies that conventional weapons couldn't touch. President Sam Torres stood before the emergency session of the Global Council and looked at the faces of world leaders who had just heard the most disturbing news in human history. The holographic display behind him showed recordings from the Nexus Prime meeting, and every person in the room understood what those images meant for Earth's future. "The Zephyrians have given us 24 hours to decide," Torres said, and his voice carried the weight of an impossible choice. "We can become their protected agricultural world or face forced relocation to a prison planet." Defense Secretary Maria Lopez stepped forward with files clutched in her hands. "Our military analysis shows that resistance is impossible," she reported. "Their technology is centuries ahead of anything we possess, and their fleet could destroy Earth in minutes." Dr. Ben Carter raised his hand from his seat in the science section. "There might be a third option," he said quietly. "Something we've been working on in the deep research labs." Torres nodded, and the lights dimmed as Carter activated his own presentation. Images of strange machines and mathematical equations filled the air above their heads. The devices looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before, with twisted metal shapes that seemed to hurt the eyes when viewed directly. "We call it pocket dimension technology," Carter explained. "The theory suggests we can fold space around entire solar systems and hide them from normal sensors." Admiral Nick Parker leaned forward in his chair. "Hide an entire star system?" he asked with disbelief in his voice. "Not just hide it," Carter continued. "We can make it exist partially outside normal space-time. To outside observers, the system would simply vanish as if it never existed at all." "Commander." Alex Grant stood up from the military section. "Even if that's possible, how do we evacuate all our colonies before the aliens notice what we're doing?" Carter smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "We don't evacuate them," he said. "We take them with us." The room exploded with questions and arguments as leaders tried to understand what the scientist was proposing. Torres raised his hand for silence and waited until the chamber became quiet again. "Explain it in simple terms, Doctor," Torres requested. Imagine space is like a piece of paper, Carter said and gestured with his hands. Normal travel moves along the surface of that paper from one point to another. What we're proposing is to fold the paper so that our destinations touch each other through another dimension. Engineer Lucy Davis stood up to support her colleague. We've been testing small-scale versions for 3 years, she added. We can already move objects the size of a city block through folded space. The power requirements must be enormous, said Director of Energy Production, Mark Johnson. That's where our fusion breakthrough comes in, Davis replied. We've learned to tap energy directly from the quantum vacuum itself. It's essentially unlimited power. Torres felt hope beginning to grow in his chest, but he forced himself to remain cautious. How long would this take to implement on a full scale? 6 months to modify our existing technology, Carter answered. Another 6 months to coordinate the evacuation of all human colonies and the implementation of the dimensional fold around Earth. Maria Lopez frowned as she studied the technical data. The Zephyrians won't wait that long, she pointed out. They expect an answer tomorrow. Then we give them an answer they want to hear, Torres said slowly as a plan began to form in his mind. We accept their offer and start preparing our agricultural world immediately. The room fell silent as everyone understood what the president was suggesting. They would lie to the most powerful beings in the galaxy while secretly preparing humanity's greatest escape attempt. Dr. Kate Williams spoke from her position near the intelligence section. I documented everything I could about their technology during our visit, she said. Their sensors are incredibly advanced, but they all operate within normal space-time, meaning they couldn't detect us if we existed primarily in folded space. Carter nodded with growing excitement. Admiral Parker activated his communication device. I have ships in deep space that could begin setting up the hidden research stations immediately, he offered. We'll need somewhere to work without alien observation. Torres looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders and saw determination replacing fear. This is our only chance for real freedom, he said. If we succeed, we'll never have to bow to alien masters. If we fail, Earth becomes a farm and humanity becomes livestock. The vote was unanimous, and within hours, the secret project began. Commander. Grant led evacuation fleets to distant colonies, while his crews prepared cover stories about mining operations and scientific research. The colonists were told they were being relocated for safety reasons during the transition to galactic membership. Engineer Davis worked around the clock with teams of scientists to build the massive dimensional fold generators. The machines required exotic materials that had to be harvested from the cores of dying stars and the event horizons of black holes. Human ships traveled to the most dangerous regions of space to gather what they needed. Dr. Carter established research stations in nebulas and asteroid fields where the energy signatures of their work would be hidden by natural phenomena. Teams of volunteers spent months in isolation developing the theoretical framework that would allow entire solar systems to exist between dimensions. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison returned to the Nexus Prime with Earth's official response. He met with Velox 7 in the same massive hall where humanity had been humiliated and formally accepted the Zephyrian offer. Earth agrees to become a protected agricultural world, Jake announced to the assembled alien delegates. We request 5 years to transition our society and prepare for our new role. Velox 7 seemed pleased by humanity's reasonable response. 5 years is acceptable, the commander agreed. We will send advisors to help guide your transformation into useful members of galactic society. The Zephyrian advisors arrived on Earth 6 months later and found exactly what they expected to see. Humans were dismantling their military installations and converting weapons factories into agricultural equipment manufacturing centers. Cities were being redesigned with vast farming districts, and the space program was being scaled back to simple cargo hauling. What the aliens didn't see were the thousands of humans working in hidden facilities around the solar system. Dr. Carter's teams had succeeded in creating stable pocket dimensions and were now testing the technology on larger and larger scales. Pilot Jenny Ross commanded a squadron of modified ships that could phase between normal space and the hidden dimensions. Her crews mapped safe routes through folded space and established communication networks that the aliens couldn't detect. "The quantum foam generators are working perfectly," Ross reported to Admiral Parker during one of their secret briefings. "We can move entire fleets through dimensional space without leaving any trace in normal reality." Parker studied the tactical displays, showing human ships appearing and disappearing like ghosts. "How long until we're ready for the full evacuation?" 3. "More years if everything goes according to plan," Carter answered from his hidden laboratory. "We need to be absolutely certain the dimensional fold will remain stable once we activate it around Earth." The years passed, and the Zephyrian advisors grew more confident that humanity was adapting well to their new role. They reported back to the Empire that humans were naturally suited for agricultural work and posed no threat to galactic security. Commander Lisa Stone led the final preparations as teams of engineers installed the massive fold generators around Earth's solar system. The devices were disguised as agricultural satellites and space elevators that the aliens had specifically requested. "Phase 1 generators are online," Stone reported to President Torres during the last month before activation. "We're ready to begin dimensional displacement." Torres stood in the hidden command center deep beneath the Pacific Ocean and watched status displays showing every human colony and research station. Millions of people had been secretly relocated to the spaces between dimensions where they waited for Earth itself to join them. "All human vessels report ready for final phase transition," Admiral Parker announced from his flagship hidden in folded. Space Dr. Carter activated the quantum field generators and space itself began to ripple around Earth's solar system. Reality bent and twisted as the planet and its sun slipped sideways into a dimension that existed parallel to normal space on. The surface Zephyrian advisors suddenly found their communication devices showing nothing but static. Their ships reported that Earth had simply vanished from all sensors as if it had never existed. Emergency signals went out to the Empire reporting that an entire star system had somehow disappeared. Velox 7 himself arrived within days to investigate the impossible phenomenon. His most advanced sensors found nothing but empty space where Earth's sun should have been. The gravitational effects were gone, and even the background radiation signature had vanished. "How does a star system simply cease to exist?" the commander demanded, but his scientists had no answers. Dr. Kate Williams watched from Earth's hidden command center as Zephyrian ships searched frantically through empty space. The aliens flew through the exact location where Earth orbited, but their sensors detected nothing because the planet now existed one dimension to the side of. Jake Morrison stood at the massive viewing window of the Galactic Council ship and watched the stars drift by like distant candles in an endless night. The ship called Nexus Prime was bigger than any human city and filled with beings from 12 different worlds. Jake had spent 3 months traveling here from Earth, and now he felt very small and very alone. The meeting hall stretched out before him like a metal canyon, with seats rising up on all sides. Thousands of alien delegates filled those seats, and their eyes glowed with different colors as they stared down at the single human representative. Jake wore his best diplomatic uniform, but it looked plain next to the shining robes and crystal armor of the other species. High Commander Velox 7 floated above the center of the hall in a bubble of blue light. The Zephyrian leader looked like a tall silver statue with 4 arms and no visible mouth. When he spoke, his voice came from speakers built into the walls, and it sounded like metal grinding against stone. The primitive species from the 3rd planet. Of Sol System requests membership in our great empire, Velox 7 announced, and many of the delegates made sounds that Jake guessed were laughter. They call themselves humans, and they think they belong among the stars. Jake stepped forward and activated his translation device. "We come in peace and friendship," he said, and his words echoed through the massive hall. "Earth offers its knowledge and resources to help build a better galaxy for all species." More laughter filled the air, and Jake felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. A creature that looked like a walking tree made clicking sounds that the translator turned into mocking words. "What could dirt dwellers possibly offer us?" Velox 7 raised one of his 4 hands, and the hall became quiet. "Show us your greatest achievements, human," he said, and Jake could hear the amusement in the mechanical voice. "Prove that your species deserves to join civilized society." Jake activated his portable display, and holographic images appeared in the air above his head. He showed them pictures of human cities with their tall buildings and flowing traffic patterns. He displayed Earth's newest starships and their quantum computers. He demonstrated their medical technology that could regrow lost limbs and cure diseases that had killed millions. The alien delegates watched in silence, but Jake could see the boredom in their glowing eyes. When he finished his presentation, Velox 7 made a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe. "Amusing," the Zephyrian commander said. "Your toys might have impressed us 50,000 years ago when we were young and foolish like you." A new voice spoke from the seats above, and Jake looked up to see a being covered in scales and tentacles. "Their starships move slower than our cargo vessels," the creature said. "Their computers think like children compared to our neural networks. Their weapons could not scratch the paint on our defensive screens," added another delegate that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. Jake felt his heart sink as more and more voices joined in to mock human achievements. Everything that Earth considered advanced technology was treated like primitive tools made by cave dwellers. Commander Lisa Stone spoke through Jake's communication device from her ship that waited outside the station. "Jake, we're reading massive energy signatures from their vessels," she said. "Their technology is beyond anything we imagined." Velox 7 seemed to hear the transmission, and his 4 arms spread wide in what might have been a gesture of welcome. "Your military leader speaks truth," he said. "Perhaps you would like to see real technology before we discuss your future." The massive viewing screens around the hall lit up with images of Zephyrian ships. They looked like living creatures made of metal and light that could fold space around themselves to travel between stars in minutes instead of months. Their weapons could destroy planets with single shots, and their shields could stop the explosion of a sun. "We have conquered death itself," Velox 7 continued as the screens showed Zephyrian scientists transferring minds between bodies like moving files between computers. "We reshape matter with our thoughts and bend time to our will." Jake watched in amazement as the aliens demonstrated technology that seemed like magic. They showed cities that existed in multiple dimensions at once, and gardens where plants grew from pure energy instead of soil. They displayed weapons that could erase things from existence and machines that could create new forms of life with a simple command. "Now, do you understand your place?" Velox 7 asked, and his voice carried across the silent hall like the sound of doom. "We offer you a generous arrangement, human." The screens changed to show images of peaceful farm worlds with green fields and blue skies. Humans worked in the gardens while Zephyrian overseers watched from floating platforms. The humans looked happy, but Jake could see they wore collars around their necks like pets. "Earth will become a protected agricultural world," Velox 7 explained. "Your people will grow food for the Empire and live simple, peaceful lives. We will handle all dangerous activities like space travel and technological development." Jake felt anger rise in his chest like a hot flame. "You want us to be your slaves," he said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Slaves," Velox 7 repeated, and the word seemed to amuse him. Such a harsh term for such a kind offer. "We prefer to think of it as protective custody for a species too primitive to survive on its own." "What if we refuse?" Jake asked, though he already feared the answer. The hall fell silent, and Jake could feel thousands of alien eyes focused on him like laser beams. Velox 7 floated closer, and his silver face somehow managed to look both sad and threatening. "Then you will be relocated to a safe system far from civilized space," the commander said. "You will have one small world to play with and strict orders, never to leave it again. This is not negotiable, human." Captain Ryan Bell watched from his position near the communications station and quietly activated his recording devices. Dr. Kate Williams sat beside him and took careful notes about everything they had seen and heard. Both humans knew this information would be vital when they returned to Earth. Jake looked around the hall one more time and saw nothing but cold alien faces staring back at him. These beings had already decided that humanity was worthless, and nothing he could say would change their minds. "We need time to consider your offer," Jake said finally. "You have one of your Earth days," Velox 7 replied. "Then you will give us your answer and accept your proper place in the natural order." The meeting ended, and Jake walked slowly back to the human quarters with his head down and his heart heavy. He had come here hoping to forge an alliance between Earth and the galaxy, but instead he had discovered that humanity was seen as nothing more than talking animals that needed to be managed. That night, Jake sat in his small room and stared out at the stars while he composed his report to Earth. He told them about the Zephyrian technology and their impossible offer. He described the casual cruelty of beings who thought they were saving humanity by destroying its freedom. Commander Stone's voice crackled through the communication system as her ship prepared to depart. "The delegation is ready to return home," she reported. "What should I tell Earth Command?" Jake closed his eyes and thought about his homeworld with its blue oceans and white clouds. He thought about the billions of humans who were going about their daily lives without knowing that aliens considered them primitive pets. "Tell them we're coming home," Jake said quietly. "Tell them everything.